Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has picked a fight with the last man on earth he should be picking a fight with, and that's Donald Trump, the guy who has the power to either keep this war going or bring it to an end. And who knows whether it's to Zelensky's liking or not, probably the not, but he does have the power to end it. And instead of working with Trump and to trying to find the best deal he can get, he's taken to public accusations. And now then this is going back and forth. And I promise you, this is not going to end well for Volodymyr Zelensky. He has actually accused Trump of being trapped in disinformation and being a stooge of Russia. I'm not making this up. I mean, it's so crazy. You can't make up stuff like this. And to try and unwind what's probably going on here, we got the great Larry Johnson back with us today, the former CIA officer, the analyst, I'm sorry, and author at sonar21.com, where all kinds of great stuff is every day. Larry, what in the world is going on with Volodymyr Zelensky?
Boy, he didn't pay attention to the 2015 presidential campaign, where anybody that took off after Donald Trump, remember the dust up with Marco Rubio, little Marco? Trump is a bit thin-skinned, and you go after him, he comes back after you viciously. So let's face it, Zelensky didn't start off in a good position. Trump still harbors, I am certain, ill feelings towards Zelensky for the role that Zelensky played in Trump's first impeachment, and hasn't forgotten nor forgiven. Now Zelensky is directly attacking him. He really should have thought twice about this, because I tell you a couple of things that can happen. One, when he's fleeing Ukraine and trying to seek refuge in the United States, sorry, Z, no visa. And any property that he has purchased in the United States, don't be surprised if the U.S. government seizes it as partial payment for the money that Zelensky stole. So he's playing. This guy's got a suicide wish. I mean, this is the fact that he has decided that his best option is to attack Donald Trump. Has he not paid attention to the last 8 years? Who has attacked Donald Trump like this and lived to tell the tale?
Yeah, or succeeded because of it. I mean, it's hard for me to even fathom. And we're going to get into, I want everybody to understand how we got to this comment right here, because this has been a series of at least 4 rounds back and forth between the two. Some people may not be aware of that, but it's amazing to watch it develop, because you can see after the second round, there was a chance for Zelensky to just keep his mouth closed and to just continue going on, grit his teeth if he needed to, vent to his friends off camera, whatever. And instead, he punted on that. And to your point exactly, Trump did not hold back on the second round, the second Trump round, which you'll see in a second. But before I get to that, I want to show you something that that's one of the fallouts. And I think that, and I'd like your view on this on the backside of this clip here. I think one of the big reasons why we are in this disastrous situation we are in, where Ukraine, the war is already lost. We just haven't figured out what the final tally is going to be or where the final lines are going to be. And one of the big reasons for that is Volodymyr Zelensky, but also the Democratic Party, and when Joe Biden was in charge, and several other leading Democrats. Here is Senator Blumenthal, who was asked just hours ago what he thought about this tiff between Donald Trump. Watch this.
What world is he living in? It is not only contrary to the facts and the truth, but utterly despicable, a disgusting betrayal of a country that has bled and fought and died for freedom. Our president has so disregarded the truth and the sacrifice of brave men and women who are upholding their freedom and ours. Their fight is our fight, and the president's surrender is pathetic and weak.
Okay, there is so much wrong with that. We'll just start with the last part here, that their fight is our fight. Is it?
Hell no. And what does Dick Blumenthal know about fighting? This is the guy who claimed he was a Vietnam combat veteran, a liar, a stolen valor, a disgraceful human being, a spineless jellyfish. So anything that he says, you might as well be listening to a pig grunting, in my view. Initially you could take the first half of what he was saying and think, oh, he's talking about Zelensky. No, he's talking about Trump. I guarantee you, when they start digging into the USAID and DOD money that has flown overseas into the coffers in Kiev, I bet you some of that money's made it back into Mr. Blumenthal's pockets. That's why he's upset. There are a number of people in the U.S. government that have been grifting off of this and getting rich across the board. And
in fact, I want to just jump into it because Trump is very focused on that very point.
President Zelensky said last week that he doesn't know where half of the money is that we gave him. Well, we gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's a lot. And we have to equalize with Europe because Europe has given us given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given 100 billion, and we've given, let's say, 300 plus. And it's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between, and they don't. But where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And I've never seen an accounting of it.
And apparently an accounting is coming, which may seal the doom of Zelensky if that is revealed, as you say.
Well, yeah, there are actually a couple of different efforts. So, there's the effort with Elon Musk and Doge, but I'm come personally familiar with one through a friend who's involved. They've identified $50 billion that have come out of Ukraine, stolen, and have gone into banks in the Caribbean. Without getting into the specific countries and banks. So,
and to whose benefit?
Well, we didn't get into that.
Okay,
but
somebody in Ukraine.
Well, yeah. Let's put it this way: nobody would be surprised if Zelensky's fingerprints weren't on this. So, what we're talking about is the utter theft of U.S. taxpayer dollars into this little piano playing comic out of Kiev. And let's recall that we're supporting a guy who has shut down the opposition press, supporting a guy that has locked up political opponents, supporting a guy that embraces Nazi ideology, supporting a guy who is persecuting the Christian church, the organized Christian church, the Eastern Orthodox Christian church in Kiev, and locking up priests. We're doing this to support democracy. This a guy who canceled elections. This a guy who refuses to hold elections. And we want to spend all of our money on him. Look, this is why, Trump authorized both J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth to go out and say what they did. You know as well as I, Danny, that the speeches that they presented, those guys didn't, scribble those on the back of an envelope while they were flying over there. These were prepared in advance. They were vetted through the National Security Council. They were coordinated with CIA, with State Department, and the message was clear. Europe is now, if they want to keep the war going, Europe can pay for it, and the United States is cutting Ukraine off. No more aid.
Exceeding to reality here, and that's what I wanted to point at. The second part of that Blumenthal clip there is his disdain. I think is probably genuine. I think he probably says it because at the beginning of the clip he said there is no factual information at all. All these charges of Trump are untrue. I think he might believe that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I'm sure he does.
The previous administration is so culpable for the hundreds of thousands and possibly over 1 million Ukrainian deaths because the war has been unwinnable from the beginning. And these guys either don't care or don't understand. And yet they're continuing to support this with a guy who is just leading his country into the destruction.
Yeah.
But they believe it. They think that there was no truth to it.
Well, and you see, Mike Pence tweeted almost the exact same thing as Blumenthal today. Earlier.
No, I didn't see that one.
Yeah. Oh, Trump's lying. God, I'm so glad we're rid of that disgrace. what people, they want to pretend that Russia just woke up one morning and said, "My God, we don't have anything better to do. Let's invade Ukraine," ignoring the fact that the United States had overthrown the government, in the democratically elected government in Ukraine with the help of the Brits, that we had been conducting annual military exercises. And what people need to understand, under U.S. law, when the United States military conducts a military exercise, it's exercising a war plan. Okay? They're not out doing jumping jacks or push-ups. They are going through the process of what it would take to alert and deploy combat units to engage an enemy. And for 20 plus years, the United States was involved with Ukraine with carrying out annual military exercises, sometimes multiple exercises, exercising war plans against who? Russia. And Russia didn't react until finally in February of 2022, they said, "Damn it, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore."
And Larry, I was just on the Charlie Savage show where I pointed out many of the things you just said there. I've got an article that's coming out that details in a lot of detail all of these things that you're talking about here, and how in December, I think it was December 17th, 2021, Putin gave one final opportunity to prevent war by saying, "Here is a draft treaty between the United States and Russia." And there was a number of things that said in there. Many of them were very positive. Ironically, some of the same language that they used then about cooperation and mutual respect with the U.S. is what they're saying now.
Yeah.
They haven't changed it. But the one thing was Article 4, where it said there will be no NATO admission into a former Soviet country, i.e. Ukraine. That was the only thing it really asked of us. And all we had to do was sign that treaty, not put NATO in there, and there would never have been a war. But it was rejected by NATO, it was rejected by Biden, and most assuredly it was rejected by Zelensky. Ergo, there is factual information to Trump's charge that Zelensky is partially responsible for this war.
Oh, absolutely. And the Yavoriv, the so-called Ukrainian military base that's in western Poland, western Ukraine, up against the border with Poland. That was a de facto NATO base. That was a NATO training center. EUCOM took down a lot of the videos, but prior to the special military operation, there were quite a few videos up showing the United States conducting NATO and EUCOM training missions at that Yavoriv facility. And that base became a collection point for mercenaries coming in and out. The Russians have attacked the base a couple of times and killed quite a few, foreign mercenaries there. But there was one in particular where they were conducting cyber training, cyber security, cyber operations. And it specifically said, and this was listed on the EUCOM page, these were for offensive cyber operations against Russia. So can you imagine how we in the United States would react if Russia was doing what was doing in Mexico, what we were doing in Ukraine? We would have declared war on Mexico a long time ago.
Yeah, there's no way we would have let that stuff go. I want to show, since that's what we titled this, is the alleged delusion or trapped in disinformation of President Trump, the claimed by Zelensky. I want to show people how we got there. And in each of these, there's 4 rounds, 2 by Trump, 2 by Zelensky, that you're going to see here in a second. I'd like your views on the escalating rhetoric between and who's telling the truth or who's more accurate and who's not, because there's some parts that Trump is going to say that are probably not accurate. They're exaggerations or minimizing in certain facts, but the fundamentals I think are spot on. Let's see what you say. First of all, here's what kind of started it, because the United States had sent Rubio and Waltz and Witkoff to talk to Lavrov and one of the other Russian persons in Riyadh. Usarov. Okay. Those were the 5 people that met in there. And that was what started, the first formal meeting that's going to start the process of negotiated sense. Well, in elsewhere in the Middle East. I think it was in the UAE when this particular interview was made, or maybe it was in Ankara, because Zelensky himself was in the region, though not in Saudi Arabia. And he went on television and was, well, a little irked about it.
Можете обговорювати що завгодно, але не можна приймати рішення без України, як завершити війну в Україні. Ті чи інші умови. І нас не запрошували на цю зустріч, російсько-американську зустріч в Саудівській Аравії. Для нас це було сюрпризом, я думаю, так, як і для багатьох. Я переконаний, для України, для нашого регіону, для Європи принципово, щоб будь-які перемовини щодо
Yeah, he continued on there, but that was the key point where he said it was a surprise to us that we weren't invited to Ukraine, because you can't have anything about Ukraine without Ukraine. First of all, is he right that there can't be anything about Ukraine without Ukraine?
No. I mean, the final signature on the surrender document, yeah, you do have to have some Ukrainian authority there to sign off. Whether it be Zelensky or somebody else, I guarantee you it won't be Zelensky. This is not, Russia is not in a position where it's suffering and the pain is so great that it wants to bring a quick end to this because, oh my gosh, we can't stand it. No, they're going to win. Now, Putin made his conditions very clear last June, and you've talked about it before, but the withdrawal, and he said this, before we can even negotiate with Ukraine, Ukraine has to do a number of things. It has to withdraw from the 4 Russian republics, the Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk. It has to denounce that it will never be part of NATO. Say that that's going to stop. It's got to vow that it's not going to attack Russian citizens, Russian speakers in Ukrainian territory. That they're going to have certain rights. I mean, those are the key ingredients. And it's got to demilitarize. So they've got to start disbanding the army. Those are Putin's preconditions before talking. So what's going on between the United States and Russia is not really about solving the war in Ukraine. This is about solving the war between the United States and Russia, backing us away from the nuclear button, putting us back on normal relations. Because, think back. During the Vietnam War, it was the Soviet Union that was supplying the North Vietnamese and was assisting the North Vietnamese in killing U.S. troops. Yet during that entire conflict and into the end, at no point did we cut off talking to the Soviets. And in fact, even after the end of that war, Nixon and dealing with people like Brezhnev, they negotiated important arms control agreements. So this is where Trump's trying to take us back to the future, to get us back in a position where we can talk to the Russians. But Ukraine, they ain't invited to this party.
Well, and that's the part I wanted to get on. So Zelensky claims in that clip that it was a surprise that he wasn't invited to Saudi Arabia. But just days before that, at the Munich Security Conference, there was a big dust up that was in a lot of the press here when one of the General Keith Kellogg was on a panel and he was being interviewed by a European moderator, and she really blasted him by saying, okay, so wait, you're saying that at these negotiations in Saudi Arabia, it's going to be 2 protagonists, the U.S. and Russia,
right,
not Ukraine, not NATO, and not European people.
Right.
He said, is that right? And he says, yes, that is correct. He said, Ukraine will be involved, but in the first one, not European Union, whatever. So they got upset about that. So Zelensky was physically there at the time, so he certainly heard that. So for him to then claim that, well, it was a surprise to us that we weren't there, aside from the clear evidence it wasn't true and it's a factual issue, what do you say about his judgment about saying that in the cameras?
You mean Kellogg's judgment?
Zelensky's
Zelensky.
judgment.
Yeah, no, Zelensky. Again, he's maybe we can attribute it to the overuse of certain illegal narcotic substances. That's one, we come up with an excuse for him. But anybody that has been halfway conscious over the last 8 years, knows that if you decide to get into a verbal battle or confrontation with Donald Trump, Trump ain't stopping. He's like the Terminator from the first movie, you know,
Right.
gets burned up, man. He's still crawling after you. The hand's still coming to get you. And Zelensky can't win this one. He doesn't have any leverage. He's not in a position, and he's counting on the Brits to protect him. Well, good luck with that, because Trump's got a vendetta and a score to settle with the Brits too, particularly Keir Starmer. And anyone thinks that that Trump's going to overlook the British role in Russiagate, and then Starmer sending political operatives to campaign against him, if they think Trump's going to go, oh, that was just politics. Nonsense.
Starmer's going to be here in Washington next week to talk, and we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
We'll see if he comes.
Yeah, I bet he will. I think he's going to have his hat in his hand, but I think he's going to come.
Well,
but
he may show up, but Trump may not even want to receive him.
We'll see. I mean, he could enjoy the opportunity to say, now about those people you were trying to help. I'm sorry this isn't Kamala Harris here today, but anyway, we'll see how that works out. I don't know. That may stay behind the camera, but Keir Starmer on our show yesterday, we played a clip of him saying he is coming to Washington to consult with Donald Trump. But so you say that's the history, if you've been paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay. To his credit, Trump's first response was fairly tame for Trump.
And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their sides. You have those magnificent golden domes that are shattered, will never be replaced. You can't replace.
Now, my guess is that he did specify in the conference there when he says this could have been negotiated, a half-baked negotiator could have prevented this. I think he was referring to that period in December 2021 where Putin offered that pretty modest treaty. And just imagine, if you will, if we had agreed to that then, there almost certainly would never have been a war. That the Luhansk and Donetsk, if they had just followed through with what Putin had been saying was the Minsk protocols, which give them political autonomy, even those would be nominally under the control of Kiev, and no one would have died in the process. That is, I think, one of the biggest condemnations on both the United States, Europe, and Zelensky himself, because they all were conspired together to refuse it.
Well, and then when they walked away from the agreement in Turkey, in Ankara, in April of 2022, that would have left Donetsk and Luhansk as part of Ukrainian territory.
Yeah, even as late as that, even after the war started. That's right.
Yeah, and that all Putin was looking to do was to secure the rights and protections of the Russian speakers, who were being actively discriminated against and both persecuted and prosecuted, and in some cases killed. And the notion that Putin was vowing from the outset that there would be blood, and let's recall that even then, as they had that agreement and tentative agreement in place, Putin, as a goodwill gesture, he ordered the withdrawal of Russian forces around that were to the north of Kiev. They withdrew, and what the West did, they prepared a demonstration of war crimes, where they claimed that the Russians had murdered civilians in Bucha, but the civilians who were dead were all wearing white armbands, which were symbols of people who favored the Russians. So, the Russians killed all the people that were supporting them. This was a deliberate provocation by the Brits, working with Ukrainian intelligence. And it was designed to create this narrative that Russia was this ruthless power. Now, here from the Russian standpoint, they're saying, we do this goodwill gesture, and now we get accused of a war crime, and on top of it, They decided to continue the war. And that was the start of the turning point for Vladimir Putin, where he recognized these people they're not willing to negotiate. They're not willing to settle this without conflict. So we're going to denazify and demilitarize.
Yeah. So that's what I think Trump had in mind when he accused Zelensky of not being willing to end the war at the beginning. That's one of the things that Blumenthal had in his mind when he was talking about how nothing that Trump said was true because he doesn't believe any of what you just said there.
Right.
But I said that Trump was relatively tame when he responded because it was relative, because he added one more thing about Zelensky that apparently Zelensky took exception to.
We have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. You know, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to. Wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, you know, it's been a long time since we've had an election? That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Now here's one thing about the comment there about the legitimacy of Zelensky, because he went past his term of service and didn't have an election. Because Russia says that, anyone else who acknowledges the fact of it is being a Putin propagandist, right? So that's like me saying, oh, look, here's a cell phone. And then someone saying, you know what? Russia said that's a cell phone too, so you must be reading from their talking points. Now, that's absurd, but that's the case that Zelensky makes when he said this.
Раз вже говоримо про 4%, ми бачили цю дезінформацію, ми розуміємо, що вона йде від Росії, ми розуміємо це, і у нас є докази, що ці цифри, вони обговорюються між Америкою і Росією. Ну, тобто, на жаль, президент Трамп з великою повагою до нього відносимося як до лідера народу, який ми дуже поважаємо, американський народ, який нас постійно підтримує. На жаль, живе в цьому дезінформаційному просторі.
Unfortunately, he exists in a misinformed space. Right. I don't know if that forward number, I bet it's probably not. It's probably his approval rating isn't quite that low. I've seen a lot of other things that have shown it's lost a whole bunch, but it's not quite that low. But that's really not relevant. What's relevant is that he has gone past his legally elected term of service by almost a year at this point, and there's not even any plans for any election here. So it is an independent, valid point that, are you a legitimate leader of this country or are you not?
Yeah, no, he's not, which is Putin's point. Putin is a lawyer. Putin puts a lot of stock in international agreements and protocols. And Putin has made it clear, you know, even if we talk to Zelensky and he signed an agreement, his signature has no significance because he's no longer legally, under the Constitution of Ukraine, the legitimate president. He has simply declared martial law and named himself to continue to occupy that office. So it's from the Russian standpoint, there's nothing to talk about with Zelensky.
And I think one of the miscalculations, and tell me what you think of this, for Zelensky to say that after Trump had said what he said in those two clips there and challenging his need for an election. And Trump even said it in the context. He said, this is not something Russia's saying. This is something I'm saying. So that should have put it into it right there.
Yeah, right.
But instead, Zelensky has to go and add this and then basically imply strongly that Trump is just stupid, that he has no idea and that he's being manipulated by the Russians. And as you say, he has some experience with that. It has some little kind of tender moments still, or feelings from when he's previously been accused of being a Russian stooge, etc. So I don't know what Zelensky was thinking. But then you have round 4, Trump's second response to that, because today, if he thought Trump was just going to accept being called a Russian stooge, he was a bit mistaken. A couple of big things on this. This is on Truth Social just shortly before we came on the air here. One of the things that Trump has said is that other than the money, he said Zelensky got us into a war that couldn't be won and never had to start. And I want to zero in on that for a second, because that's kind of one of the things we're talking about that Trump had mentioned, that you have talked about. The war could easily have been prevented. But the thing that I found really refreshing there is he said a war that couldn't be won. So no matter what happened on the ground, any rational estimation, we've said this 100 times, of the balance of power between the two makes it crystal clear that Russia will never lose the war militarily, and that Ukraine can never succeed militarily. So why would you want to fight a military battle to achieve a political outcome that can never succeed? So Trump calls him out on that. What do you say?
Well, he is the other interesting part of that posting is that, from Trump's view, what the money that the Europeans have given, they really haven't given. They've made loans to Ukraine, and those loans are guaranteed, if nothing else, through that $300 billion that have been seized and are sitting in Euroclear in a bank in Europe. So Trump's looking at that and saying, hey, we've spent $350 billion and we don't have, we've got no guarantee. So looking at, he's now going after the very nature of this relationship, where the United States has been the one supplying the bulk of the money, the bulk of the intelligence, the bulk of the weapons, the bulk of the ammunition. And now, instead of getting any kind of cooperation out of Zelensky, Zelensky's attacking Trump. What an incredibly dumb thing to do. Because
and especially right now, obviously we've now formally entered into discussions with the Russians, where obviously these things are on the table. Trump has said nothing but that he wants this to end soon. He wants to end the killing. And so now that you want to take on Trump, Gary, if you could go back to that True Social account here, because the second part I think is even more telling, because he said down there toward the end of it that Zelensky is a dictator without elections, and Zelensky better move faster. He's not going to have a country left. I mean, that's a pretty strong broadside. What do you think Trump means that? Or better question, what do you think Trump means when he says that?
Well, they're going to pull, the U.S. is going to pull the plug. I've already heard that they've started pulling CIA officers out of Ukraine. So the CIA paramilitary support that's been there and active, that's starting to be unraveled. That U.S. intelligence ISR platforms are no longer operating, that's entirely up to the Brits. You want to collect intel, you go collect it. We're not doing that anymore. So if those elements are true, the United States is already starting to disengage. And it's going to be, the reality is, Ukraine's going to run out of money and weapons, because Europe, despite all of its big talks, not in a position to provide or replace anything. So Zelensky is literally biting the hand that feeds him. Instead of exercising some humility, instead of recognizing, you know what, getting into a public pissing contest with Donald Trump is not a good idea. I'll keep my concerns in private. I'll go talk to him. If Zelensky was smart, he'd be praising Donald Trump for as a great leader and what a wise man he is, and that Zelensky wants to do whatever he can help Donald Trump to achieve his objectives, and then get him in private and say, "What the hell are you doing to me?" That'd be one thing. But to do this out in public, and again, I have friends that have met with Trump in person, where they've delivered very tough messages to Trump. In person, he can take it. And actually, sometimes he listens. But when you try to take him down in public, it's just, hey, he's this New York brawler, and that's what comes out.
And Larry, I mean, come on, man, read the room. I mean, all the signs are out there. It's over. It's over, past tense. you should be doing everything you can to say, well, let me get as much as I can out of this deal. Let me get the best terms I can. Let me get the best parachute to land somewhere safe that I can. I mean, that should be animating his actions right now. There is no alternative, none.
Right.
But do you think, quick question, do you think that Zelensky is so detached from reality, from whatever sources, you mentioned potentially drugs and some other stuff, or just pressure, that he actually thinks that by saying these things publicly, he's going to shame Trump into changing course? What do you think is on his mind?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's the latter. I think he's the sources, the people he's talking to in the United States and in the European Union are telling him, you can't back down. Trump's a bully. You just got to confront him. Boy, talk about bad advice. Trump is he's going to be unrelenting in this. And again, it'd be one thing if it was just confined to this area, but Trump still remembers this character helped put him into the impeachment box the first time. Zelensky did. When Zelensky could have helped Trump from going through that and didn't lift a finger. Do you think, and basically, when Zelensky's body is on fire, and if Trump is drinking a cup of coffee, Trump won't even pour a cup of coffee on to try to put it out.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty harsh imagery there. We'll leave that where it is. I think that you've made a pretty strong case there that Zelensky is just detached from reality and can't be trusted upon to even have a seat at the table, because he will make demands that can never be met and try for leverage that doesn't exist. And I think that a strong case can also be made that President Biden was in that same camp, just could not deal with the reality and just continued on, or else he recognized the reality and just followed these policies anyway, because they, quote, hurt Russia, inconsequential to how many Ukrainian people died in the process. Either of those things is possible. But now that you have Trump, who's talking stuff here that seems, at least in large part, to be based on the truth and on ground truth reality. One other player in this drama also seems to be maybe the most reasonable person. So I want you, as I play this next clip of this other person, you tell me, of those four people, of Trump, Biden, Zelensky, and this guy, who sounds the most logical?
Других участников, то, во-первых, Россия никогда не отказывалась от контактов с европейцами. Россия никогда не отказывалась от переговорного процесса с Украиной. Никогда. Это наши.
Okay, actually, just pause there if you could, Gary. So let's look at that. One of the things that I have heard so many times over the years, plural, is that everybody, or many people, keep saying about Putin, he is not even willing to negotiate. He's not talking about any negotiations. But then here Putin is claiming, no, we've never said that. We've always been willing to negotiate. Who's telling the truth here?
Well, no, Putin is, and go back to when Putin first came into office in 1999 and asked the United States, then Bill Clinton, hey, can we join NATO? Following up on a request that had been made years earlier by Boris Yeltsin. And the answer was still no and hell no. Then you jump ahead to the conference in Bucharest in 2007. It was the Munich Security Council. Or maybe it was, I don't know if they held it in Munich or Bucharest. Regardless, Putin gave a speech about sort of the end of the unilateral world and the multipolar. Man, icy. He was met with defiance throughout. And then the Niet Mens Niet cable from Bill Burns. And so repeatedly throughout the years, Putin has always sought to have some sort of negotiated arrangement with the West. And up to and including that treaty that you referenced earlier in December of 2021 that was put on the table, and then outright rejected by the West in January of 2022, which then led to the start of the special military operation. And again, they negotiated Minsk II, thinking, okay, hey, we got a deal here. And it turned out it was a sham. They got lied to. They had negotiated in good faith prior to Putin the intermediate nuclear forces agreement, and then Donald Trump shows up and says, that agreement's canceled. Forget about it. And then when you had the actual agreement between Turkey and the Turkey brokered between Ukraine and Russia, the West, the United States and Britain interfered and destroyed that. So when you're looking at it from Putin's perspective, you realize that the West cannot be trusted, and no matter what they say, their word is no good. So this is Trump's got a lot of work to do to try to rebuild U.S. credibility in the eyes of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, he does, but he seems to be at least making some headway on that.
Yes,
They're trying to
yes.
get together, you see, by the end of February. That's what they're hoping for, or the 1st of March. Gary, if you could go back to that video, I want to continue on with something else that Putin says here that I'd like Larry's view on. So just go ahead and restart that when it comes up.
Переговорного процесса с Украиной никогда. Это наши, так скажем, партнеры по этим переговорам отказались, прекратили контакты с Россией, европейцы, а украинская сторона запретила сама себе вести переговоры, вышла из переговорного процесса в Стамбуле, прямо публично об этом.
Okay, just stop there too. So here you say, when you actually want to talk about the facts, it's not Russia who's been unwilling to negotiate. It's been Ukraine that by law prevented itself from having any discussions with Russia going forward, which that law still is on the books to this day.
Right.
And as he pointed out there, they're the ones that walked away from Istanbul. It wasn't the Russians. Those are absolute irrefutable facts.
Yeah.
So how do we get from these absolute unequivocal pieces of evidence to the point to where, with like Blumenthal, who's saying there's no truth to any of it? How does that happen?
The same way that you have a society under Joe Biden that was saying that men could get pregnant and breastfeed. I mean, it's that, Danny, it's that same kind of delusional divorce from reality. You know, they try to pretend that there are no such thing as objective facts, that it's all just perception and spin and interpretation. But, you know, that's why I think it was in the summer of 2023, there was an African delegation that showed up in Moscow trying to help, say, hey, we're here to try to help broker a ceasefire. And Putin said, well, we'd made an agreement, and here it is, guys. He passed it around to them. And the Africans were genuinely shocked because they'd been hearing the West spin and they'd been hearing Ukraine's story. But now that they saw the actual document, which had the actual initials, both of the Russian and the Ukrainian negotiators on it, they knew that Russia wasn't lying. And as you correctly note, Zelensky got a law passed that it's illegal and punishable by going to prison if you try to negotiate with the Russians, if you're Ukrainian and try to negotiate with the Russians. And so that's where, you know, Putin's going, so who are we supposed to talk to? Because they've said it's illegal.
They said it's illegal, and the guy who says it's illegal also isn't legitimate. So
Right.
yeah, there's that problem too. All right. So in the last few minutes we have here, where is this going to go? Let's say that last headline that Gary popped up there turns out to be true, and that there is a Trump Putin conference here, a physical meeting, you know, possibly within the next couple of weeks, maybe even sooner, and that actually ends up happening. What can be agreed to there when we can be sure that Zelensky will definitely not have a seat at that table? Probably nobody else in Europe will either. The United States has in the current administration, many senior officials have said, we're talking to European leaders every day across the board. We went to Munich and we're sitting down with a bunch of them. So we're communicating with them. But this is a two protagonist deal right here. What could come out of that talk the first time that Trump and Putin meet?
Well, what Trump and Putin are going to discuss is Ukraine's not going to actually be a central part of the discussion, I would suggest. We already got word that as a result of the initial preliminary negotiations between the Russians and Americans in Saudi Arabia yesterday, they're going to set up 6 subgroups. Each subgroup will have a particular negotiator or negotiating team from each side involved. Group 1 is going to focus on what's called strategic security and arms control, looking at like the New START treaty. Group 2 is going to look at a review of the global security architecture. Does it make sense to have a UN Security Council where India and Brazil, for example, aren't represented, and you don't have a solid Africa representative? Group 3 is going to look at bilateral diplomatic relations. So to get both from the U.S. and the Russian standpoint, get back to a normal diplomacy. Group 4 is going to look at energy and sanctions, and they're going to be focused on that. Group 5 is going to look at Ukraine. They'll talk, okay, what needs to be done to get down with Ukraine? And I'm sure the Russians will say, close your checkbook, cut off the flow of funds, and it'll be over. And then Group 6 is going to look at international affairs, things such as the Middle East, relations with Iran, and the Arctic. So Americans need to understand this. What Trump has initiated with Russia is not about ending the war in Ukraine. Good Lord, no. This is much broader. This is global in scope. And, if anything, the events on the ground in Ukraine are going to dictate the outcome. And what we're seeing is the Russian advances are accelerating, and Ukraine's ability to defend is
declining. Yeah.
Well, declining or decelerating. And what you're going to see now with this people in Kiev, in the military, in the intelligence service, once they recognize that U.S. support for Zelensky is over, he is now going to be a target of coups, more so than he ever was before. He's now, it's open season on Zelensky going forward.
Well, no, I mean, how could that not be a threat?
Yeah.
If the people whose lives depend on you making a good decision find out that you bit the hand that fed you, that the guy who could at least get you the least bad negotiated outcome possible now may give you a worse outcome. I mean, that's you can see that's not going to make some people very happy, nor especially the people and the family members who are dying every day because of the orders you've given for something that can't be accomplished. You got to think that at some point that's going to come to an end.
Yeah. And this is at the same time that he's trying to step up the recruitment of 18-year-olds to force them into the war. But Russia, I don't know if you saw that today, Russia moved out of Kursk into Sumy. So they've now, what they're doing is
I did miss. I was so focused on getting ready for the show, I actually did not see that.
Yeah, that's happened. So the Russians they're going to start forming a cauldron and will cut off all remaining Ukrainian forces that are in Kursk. They will be completely encircled and destroyed. Then you're going to see Russia's going to be in a position to move from the north, from the east, and from the south. And, when you're coming on 3 axes of attack, Ukraine is not going to know which way to turn. And at some point, key military officers are going to, at least that are not aligned with the neo-Nazis, they're going to seek a way to bring an end to this so that they don't die.
I mean, it's certainly been history before. We saw it happen, obviously, with the attempt to assassinate Hitler. We saw it with the successful coup and the assassination of the leader of South Vietnam when we were still there. So that wouldn't be a shock if it happened. And Zelensky is playing with a lot more than just a personal spat with Donald Trump. But we'll see how it works out. We'll certainly keep coming back to you for these kinds of good analysis that you have here. And we'll be tracking this stuff as it happened. But as always, we really appreciate you coming on today.
I am always honored by the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll certainly keep you guys informed too. This stuff's happening at a pretty fast pace. So as these events keep on unfolding, you can count on Daniel Davis Deep Dive to give you the true skinny, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, no matter what it is that you need to make sense of your world. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.